The classroom fell silent as Ms. Alder's voice dripped with mockery, reading my essay aloud. Every sentence I'd worked on for hours became a joke in her mouth. The analysis of symbolism in classic literature that I'd stayed up late researching was met with exaggerated pauses and raised eyebrows. My classmates shifted in their seats, some giggling nervously. When I whispered, "Please stop," she slammed the paper on my desk so hard it made me jump. "You'll be lucky if you even graduate, Marin," she said, her voice cutting through the room like ice. "Let alone do anything academic." Laughter erupted around me. My best friend, sitting 2 rows back, looked away. I grabbed my bag with shaking hands and ran out, tears burning my eyes before I even reached the hallway. The fluorescent lights blurred as I stumbled toward the bathroom, my heart pounding in my ears. I locked myself in a stall and let the tears fall, clutching that marked-up essay like it was evidence of a crime. My name is Marin Vega, and that day my teacher decided I'd fail forever. But I decided something too. She'd eat those words, every single one. The principal's office smelled like coffee and old files. I sat across from Principal Hayes, explaining what happened, my voice still shaky. He nodded politely, his fingers steepled under his chin like he was really considering my words. "Ms. Alder is strict," he finally said, "but her methods are effective. She pushes students to succeed." "That wasn't pushing," I said. "That was humiliation." He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Sometimes tough love feels harsh, Marin. But teachers like Ms. Alder have decades of experience. Maybe focus on improving your work rather than questioning her approach." I left his office feeling smaller than when I'd entered. Outside the door, I heard voices. Ms. Alder was talking to another teacher near the water fountain. "Some kids are just born for mediocrity," she said, her voice carrying down the empty hallway. "No amount of effort changes basic capability." I pressed my back against the wall, listening. The other teacher murmured something I couldn't hear. Ms. Alder laughed. "Trust me, I've seen hundreds of students. You learn to spot the ones who'll never make it." I walked away slowly, her words following me like shadows. Born for mediocrity, never make it. Those phrases became fuel. At home, I expected comfort. My father sat at the kitchen table, still in his work clothes from the construction site. I told him everything, the humiliation, the laughter, the principal's dismissal. He just sighed heavily. "Maybe she's right, Marin. College isn't for everyone." My mother stood at the sink, washing dishes, her back to us. She didn't turn around. Dad continued. "Your mother and I didn't go to college. We turned out fine. You could learn a trade, get a real job." "Writing essays won't pay bills, but I love literature," I protested. "I want to study it, teach it someday." He shook his head. "That's fantasy talk. You need to be realistic. Starting Monday, you're picking up weekend shifts at the grocery store. Help this family instead of wasting time on dreams." My mother finally spoke, her voice quiet. "Your father's right, honey. School isn't everything." I went to my room, their words echoing Ms. Alder's. Everyone was telling me the same thing. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't college material. I was born for mediocrity. That night, I opened a fresh notebook and started writing. If everyone believed I'd fail, I'd prove them all wrong. 1 page at a time. The notebook became my secret rebellion. Every night after my parents went to bed, I'd write under my covers with a small flashlight. Essays about books I borrowed from the library, analysis of poetry, research on famous authors. I recorded myself reading them on an old tape recorder, practicing like I was giving lectures. The pages filled with my thoughts, my arguments, my voice. For 3 months, I kept it hidden under my mattress. Then one Saturday, my younger brother came into my room while I was at work. He found the notebook, read through it, and showed it to my parents. When I got home, they were waiting. My father held the notebook like it was evidence. "Still wasting time on this nonsense?" he asked. "I told you to focus on real work." My mother looked disappointed. "We're trying to help you, Marin. This obsession isn't healthy." The worst part came Monday morning. My brother, thinking he was being helpful, had taken the notebook to school and given it to Ms. Alder. To show her I was trying, he said later. He thought she'd be impressed. Instead, she decided to make an example of me. Again. Ms. Alder stood at the front of the classroom, waving my private notebook like a flag. "Class," she announced, "we need to discuss academic integrity." My stomach dropped. She opened to a page where I'd analyzed themes in a novel we hadn't studied yet. "This," she said, tapping the page, "is either plagiarized or copied from somewhere online. No 16-year-old writes like this." I stood up, my voice shaking. "I wrote that myself. from my own research. She smiled coldly. Then you won't mind detention while we investigate, and you'll receive a 0 on your next assignment for attempted deception. But I started. Sit down, Marin, you're embarrassing yourself. The class was silent. I sat, my face burning. As we left class, a folded note landed on my desk. I opened it carefully. You're actually good. Don't stop writing. The handwriting was neat, unfamiliar. I looked around and caught the eye of Nira, a quiet girl who always sat in the front. She gave me the smallest nod before disappearing into the hallway. That note saved me, because in that moment, someone believed in me, just one person, but it was enough. Nira found me in the library the next day. I've been reading your work, she said quietly. Your brother showed it around before giving it to Ms. Alder. I wanted you to know it's really good. We started meeting secretly after school. Nira tutored at the community center and invited me to join. While other students worked on homework, we talked about books, writing, ideas. She told me about an essay competition for high school students. State level. Winner gets recognition and scholarship money. You should enter, she insisted. With what? I asked bitterly. Ms. Alder destroyed my notebook. I remember most of it, I admitted. I could rewrite the best pieces, then do it. We spent 2 weeks reconstructing my essay. Nira helped me refine arguments, strengthen evidence. The day before the deadline, we submitted it online. 2 months later, an envelope arrived at my house. Thick, official-looking. I opened it with trembling hands. Congratulations. First place. State high school essay competition. I screamed so loud my mother came running. We did it, I told Nira later. We actually did it. Her smile was genuine. No, you did it. I just reminded you that you could. The award letter included instructions for the public ceremony. Winners would be announced at a district assembly and the scholarship would be presented officially. I couldn't stop smiling all week. Then 3 days before the ceremony, Ms. Alder called me to her desk. I understand you entered some competition, she said casually. Yes, I replied, trying to contain my excitement. I won first place. Her expression didn't change. I'll need to verify the results with the committee. Give me your letter. Something felt wrong, but she was my teacher. I handed it over. She placed it in her desk drawer. I'll make sure it's properly filed, she said. The ceremony came and went. My name wasn't called. Confused, I asked the coordinator afterward. We sent notification to your school, she explained. Your teacher should have informed you, but Ms. Alder said I started. Check online, the coordinator suggested. The results are posted publicly. That evening, Nira showed me her phone. There was my name, first place with scholarship eligibility. Ms. Alder had deliberately kept it from being announced. The prize, which was supposed to go toward college credits, was now void because I'd missed the official ceremony. Rage turned cold inside me, but cold rage burns longer than hot anger. It becomes determination. Steel. The district college fair was held at the convention center downtown. Students needed permission slips signed by teachers. Mine came back denied. Ms. Alder had written, not recommended for college track students. Nira gave me her extra badge. Were your hair different, she suggested. They won't check closely. I went, terrified of being caught but desperate to see what possibilities existed beyond my high school. The hall was full of university booths, colorful banners, excited students. I wandered, collecting brochures, talking to representatives. At the Dalton University table, a professor named Dr. Helena Cruz was answering questions. I showed her my reconstructed essay. She read it slowly, carefully. This belongs in an academic journal, she said, looking up at me with genuine interest. Have you considered our literature program? Before I could answer, a hand grabbed my wrist. Hard. Ms. Alder stood behind me, her face red with fury. You forged credentials to be here, she hissed. That's serious. I tried to explain, but she dragged me toward the exit like I was a criminal. Dr. Cruz called after us. Wait, is there a problem? Ms. Alder didn't even turn around. She pulled me outside into the parking lot, her grip bruising. You just made the biggest mistake of your academic career, she said. Then she drove me back to school in complete silence. The suspension letter arrived the next day. Forgery of credentials. Unauthorized attendance at official event. 3 days, no appeals. My parents were furious. This is exactly what we warned you about, my father said. Your obsession with college is making you break rules. I tried to explain, but they wouldn't listen. During my suspension, I stayed in my room. The first day, I was angry. The second day, I was sad. The third day, something shifted. I opened my laptop and started writing. Not an essay for class, a real academic paper. I titled it Silenced Voices in Education: How Authority Figures Discourage Academic Pursuit in Working-Class Students. I wrote about my experience, backed by research, citing studies on educational inequality. I wrote about teachers who use power to crush rather than elevate. I wrote for 12 hours straight, barely eating. When I finished, I had 15 pages of careful argument and documented evidence. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. It was my voice, clear and unbreakable. I saved it to a flash drive and hid it in my sock drawer. This paper would matter. I didn't know how yet, but I knew it would. The guidance counselor, Mr. Torres, called me to his office the week I returned. I expected more punishment. Instead, he closed the door and spoke quietly. I heard about what happened at the college fair, he said, and I read the paper you wrote during suspension. My heart stopped. How did you? Neera gave it to me, asked me to read it. Mr. Torres leaned forward. This is exceptional work, Marin. You should apply for the Horizons Scholarship. Full ride to any state university. My breath caught. Really? He nodded. It's competitive. You'll need stellar essays, transcripts, and a teacher recommendation. The recommendation has to come from a core subject teacher. English, math, science, or history. My English teacher was Ms. Alder. My history teacher rarely noticed I existed. Math and science teachers barely knew my name. You'll figure it out, Mr. Torres said. Application deadline is in 6 weeks. That afternoon, I researched everything about Horizons. Full tuition, room and board, books. It was my only chance. Without it, college was impossible. I needed that teacher recommendation, which meant I needed to ask Ms. Alder. The thought made me sick, but I had no choice. I waited until after class when everyone had left. Ms. Alder was erasing the board, her back to me. I need to ask you something, I said quietly. She turned, eyebrows raised. I'm applying for the Horizons Scholarship. I need a teacher recommendation. Would you be willing to sign? The silence stretched for a long moment. Then she smiled. That cold, sharp smile I'd learned to recognize. Let me be clear, Marin. I won't help you embarrass yourself. You're not scholarship material. You're barely passing my class. But my grades, I protested, are adequate at best. You lack the intellectual rigor for university-level work. This is me being honest. Save yourself the rejection. But if you just signed, I started. No, I won't attach my name to an application that will fail. It would reflect poorly on my judgment. She turned back to the board. You're dismissed. I walked out, my hands clenched into fists. That night, I made a decision. I'd submit the application anyway. Mr. Torres said the recommendation was required, but maybe I could explain the situation. Include my essay competition win, my academic paper, anything that proved I deserved consideration. It was a long shot, but long shots were all I had left. 6 weeks later, I'd almost forgotten about the application. I'd focused on maintaining my grades, working weekend shifts, and writing in secret. Then one Thursday afternoon, a thick envelope arrived. Dalton University seal. My hands shook as I opened it. Congratulations, Marin Vega. You have been selected as a Horizons Scholar, I screamed, loud and long and without caring who heard. My mother came running from the kitchen. What happened? Are you hurt? I held up the letter, tears streaming down my face. I got in, full scholarship. College. She stared at the paper like it was written in another language. Her expression was shocked, then slowly transformed into something like pride. Oh, Marin, she whispered. The next day at school, I couldn't hide my joy. I practically floated through the hallways. Ms. Alder saw me celebrating at my locker, hugging Neera. She walked past and muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, let's see how long you last there. I turned and looked at her directly. Thank you for your confidence, Ms. Alder. It's been very motivating. Her face tightened, but she said nothing, just walked away. I'd won this round, but I knew she didn't believe it would last. College was brutal. Dalton University was beautiful, prestigious, and completely overwhelming. My freshman year felt like drowning. The other students had gone to private schools, taken AP classes, had tutors. I'd fought just to get here. My first English exam came back with a failing grade. I stared at the red ink, Ms. Alder's voice echoing in my head. You'll never graduate. I called home that night, crying. Maybe I should come back. Maybe this was a mistake. My mother surprised me. You stay there, she said firmly. You earned this, so you failed one test. You'll pass the next. But what if I can't? Then you'll fail better, but you don't quit. I hung up and looked around my dorm room. Neera had sent me a care package with snacks and a note. You've got this. I took the essay with Ms. Alder's comment, the one that had started everything. You'll be lucky if you even graduate. I taped it above my desk. Every morning I'd see it. Every night before bed, I'd read it. That sentence became my fuel. When papers felt impossible, when exams seemed too hard, when I wanted to quit, I'd look at those words. And then I'd work harder. Second semester, I took contemporary literature with Dr. Helena Cruz, the same professor from the college fair. She didn't recognize me at first. Then during office hours, I reminded her about our meeting. "You're the student Ms. Alder dragged away," she said, her eyes widening. "I wondered what happened to you." I told her everything. The scholarship, the struggle, the failing grade. She listened carefully. "You have fire," she said finally. "Most students who face what you've faced would have given up already. The fact that you're still here, still fighting, that's what matters." She became my academic mother figure, tough but supportive, demanding but fair. She pushed me to think deeper, write clearer, argue stronger. By the end of the semester, my grades had improved dramatically. Dr. Cruz pulled me aside after finals. "I'm working on a research project about resilience in first-generation college students. Would you be interested in co-authoring?" "Me? Co-author actual research?" She smiled. "You've got the lived experience and the analytical mind. This could be your first publication." I said yes immediately. That summer, instead of going home, I stayed on campus. We worked 12-hour days, researching, writing, revising. It was the hardest academic work I'd ever done, and I loved every minute of it. My parents visited campus that fall for family weekend. I was excited to show them around, introduce them to Dr. Cruz, share my world. They seemed uncomfortable from the moment they arrived. Too many buildings, too many books, too many people who looked different from us. At lunch, my father looked at my textbooks. "You're spending all day reading about dead poets," he asked. "For what?" "To understand literature, culture, history," I explained. He shook his head. "You could be making real money instead." My mother stayed quiet, picking at her food. When I introduced them to Dr. Cruz, my father was polite but distant. After they left, I sat alone in the library. The disbelief wasn't just from Ms. Alder. It ran deeper. My whole upbringing had taught me that people like me didn't do this, didn't study literature, didn't become professors, didn't aim for something beyond survival. For the first time, I understood what I was really fighting against. Not just one cruel teacher, but generations of low expectations, systemic barriers, and voices that said people from my background should know their place. That realization could have crushed me. Instead, it made me more determined. I wasn't just proving Ms. Alder wrong anymore. I was breaking a cycle. The research paper Dr. Cruz and I wrote was submitted to a national conference on educational equity. We didn't expect much. Competition was fierce, and I was just an undergraduate. Then the acceptance email arrived. Our proposal had been selected for presentation, and we'd won the Emerging Scholars Award. My name would appear in an academic journal. I called Nira, who'd stayed in touch throughout college. "You're published," she said, her voice full of pride. "You're actually published." The awards ceremony was formal. Professors in suits, academics from major universities, people who'd spent careers building scholarly reputations. And me, a sophomore from a working-class family who'd been told she'd never graduate. When they called our names, Dr. Cruz squeezed my hand. "This is your moment," she whispered. I walked to the stage, accepted the plaque, and gave a short speech about why educational research mattered. The applause was genuine. After the ceremony, Dr. Cruz handed me another envelope. This came today. She'd been waiting for the right moment to share it. Inside was a letter from Dalton's graduate program. Full scholarship offer for their master's in education. "You've earned this," Dr. Cruz said, "and you'll be amazing." I held the letter, reading it over and over. Graduate school, a path to becoming a professor myself. Ms. Alder's words echoed one more time. "Let alone do anything academic." I smiled. "Watch me." During winter break of my senior year, I needed to collect official transcripts from my high school. I'd been back to town, but never to the building itself. The hallways looked smaller than I remembered, the classrooms less intimidating. I signed in at the office, and while waiting for the records clerk, I saw her, Ms. Alder. She was substituting in someone else's classroom, not teaching her own classes anymore. Our eyes met. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by something harder to read. I picked up my transcripts, now stamped with magna cum laude from Dalton University. As I turned to leave, Ms. Alder spoke from the doorway. "Congratulations, Marin." Her voice was flat. "You've done well for yourself." "Thank you," I replied carefully. The records clerk, an older woman I remembered fondly, smiled. Ms. Alder was moved to substitute rotation last year. Some parent complaints about her teaching methods. Ms. Alder's jaw tightened. I should get back to class. Before leaving, I couldn't resist. Just so you know, I'm starting a PhD program next fall. Her face went carefully blank. How nice. Don't gloat, Marin, that wouldn't be becoming. I wasn't gloating. Just updating you on my academic progress. Since you were always so interested. I walked out, my head high, those transcripts in hand. Justice didn't always need to be loud. Sometimes silence and success spoke louder than words ever could. Graduate school was relentless. The coursework was demanding, the research intensive, the expectations impossibly high. Some days I wondered if I'd made a mistake, if maybe I'd reached my limit. Then I'd remember where I came from. The girl who'd run out of a classroom in tears. The teenager told she was born for mediocrity. I couldn't quit. Not now. My dissertation focused on resilience in marginalized students, examining how authority figures either nurture or destroy academic confidence. I interviewed dozens of students with stories like mine. Teachers who told them they weren't smart enough, parents who discouraged higher education, systems that had set them up to fail. One chapter specifically analyzed the impact of public humiliation in classrooms. I quoted, without attribution, the exact words Ms. Alder had used. You'll be lucky if you even graduate. That chapter won a departmental award for best research contribution. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very words meant to destroy me had become part of a scholarly analysis that would help other students. 3 years into my PhD, I was exhausted. My laptop died during dissertation revisions, costing me days of work. Imposter syndrome hit hard, but every setback just became another section of my research. Every doubt transformed into data. I was living proof that resilience could be studied, documented, and ultimately taught. My dissertation defense was scheduled for a Friday morning in April. The committee sat in a semicircle, their faces professional and unreadable. I presented my research, fielding questions about methodology, analysis, and implications. After 90 minutes, they asked me to step outside. I waited in the hallway, my heart pounding, replaying every answer I'd given. Dr. Cruz opened the door, her face serious. Then she smiled. Congratulations, Dr. Vega. The relief was overwhelming. I'd done it. I was officially Dr. Marin Vega, PhD in education. 2 weeks later, Dalton offered me a position, assistant professor of education, starting the following fall. My first responsibility would be teaching undergraduate education courses and continuing my research. During the orientation for new faculty, the department chair asked what kind of events I'd like to host. Public lectures, community engagement, that sort of thing. I have an idea, I said slowly. A lecture series on teacher-student relationships. Specifically, how educators can encourage rather than discourage students from marginalized backgrounds. She loved it. We scheduled the inaugural lecture for October. I had 6 months to prepare. 6 months to craft a message about the power teachers hold and the responsibility that comes with it. And 6 months to decide whether to invite one particular teacher from my past. The decision kept me awake for weeks. Should I invite Ms. Alder? Would it be petty? Would it be justice? Would it mean anything, or would I just be reopening old wounds? Dr. Cruz offered perspective. What would 16-year-old Marin want? I thought about the girl who'd run out of class in tears, who'd been told she'd never graduate, who'd fought through doubt and humiliation and systemic barriers. She'd want Ms. Alder to see what she became, not for revenge, for proof. I drafted the invitation formally. Dalton University Department of Education cordially invites you to attend a public lecture titled Encouragement as a Pedagogical Tool, How Teachers Shape the Futures They Underestimate. I included the date, time, and location, then added a personal note. Ms. Alder, I'd be honored if you could attend. Your impact on my academic journey has been significant. Best regards, Dr. Marin Vega, Assistant Professor of Education. I sent it to my old high school, addressed to her personally. 2 weeks later, an RSVP arrived. Simple, handwritten, attending. My hands shook as I read that single word. She was coming. After everything, she'd actually be in the audience. Part of me wanted to cancel, to avoid the confrontation. But another part, the part that had survived and succeeded, knew this was necessary. Not just for me, for every student who'd ever been dismissed. This was bigger than one teacher or one moment. This was about changing the narrative. The day of the lecture, I woke up at 5 in the morning. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything except the hours ticking down. I practiced my speech a dozen times, adjusting words, perfecting timing. Dr. Cruz met me for coffee. "You're going to be brilliant," she said. "Just remember why you're doing this." "For the students," I said. "For everyone who was told they weren't good enough." "Exactly. Not revenge. Education." By 6 that evening, the auditorium began filling. Local teachers, university faculty, education students, community members interested in pedagogical reform. I stood backstage, peeking through the curtain. And there in the third row sat Ms. Alder. She looked older, grayer, smaller somehow, but it was definitely her. My stomach twisted with anxiety and something else. Not quite fear, not quite triumph, something between them. The department chair introduced me, listing my credentials, my research, my publications. The audience applauded as I walked to the podium in my tailored suit. I gripped the edges of the lectern, my heart beat thunderous in my ears. In the third row, Ms. Alder sat stone-faced, waiting. Our eyes met for just a second. I took a breath and began. When I was 16 years old, a teacher told me I'd never graduate. Gasps rippled through the auditorium. I never named her. I didn't need to. The story I told was about a student humiliated in front of her class, about public mockery used as a teaching tool, about how one sentence could nearly destroy a young person's belief in themselves. But I also talked about resilience, about the counselor who believed in me, the friend who supported me, the professor who saw potential, about how one negative voice can be powerful, but it doesn't have to be definitive. My research shows, I continued, that students from marginalized backgrounds are disproportionately discouraged from pursuing higher education, often by the very teachers meant to guide them. I presented data, case studies, statistics, but I also shared stories, real voices from my research subjects, students who'd been told they weren't college material, who'd been mocked for their dreams, who'd succeeded anyway, carrying those cruel words as both wounds and fuel. The auditorium was silent except for my voice. I talked about the responsibility educators have, the power they wield, often without realizing it, how one moment of cruelty can echo for years, but also how one moment of encouragement can change everything. I concluded with specific pedagogical strategies, ways teachers could identify and nurture potential rather than dismiss it. In the third row, Ms. Alder's head was lowered, her shoulders tight. When I finished, the audience rose in a standing ovation. The applause washed over me like vindication. After the applause faded, I took questions from the audience. Thoughtful questions about implementation, about addressing bias, about measuring impact. Through it all, Ms. Alder remained seated, her face unreadable. When the formal lecture ended, people crowded around to speak with me. Students thanked me for sharing my story. Teachers asked for copies of my research. Faculty members invited me to future collaborations. Then the crowd parted, and Ms. Alder stood before me. The noise around us seemed to fade. "You made your point," she said quietly. Her voice lacked its old sharpness. I met her gaze steadily. This wasn't about making a point. It was about preventing what happened to me from happening to other students. She flinched slightly. "You've done well for yourself, despite everything." Because of everything, I corrected gently. The obstacles taught me resilience. The doubt taught me determination. The humiliation taught me empathy. She looked at me for a long moment. "You've become more than I thought possible." I smiled, but there was no cruelty in it. "No, Ms. Alder, I became exactly what was always possible. You just couldn't see it." She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and walked away without another word. Students nearby had been filming, taking photos, posting about the moment. By morning, clips would be everywhere, but I didn't care about that. What mattered was the conversation we just had. Short but complete. She'd witnessed what I'd become. That was enough. The lecture went viral within days. Short clips spread across social media. The disowned student becomes professor. Teacher faces former student she humiliated. Comments flooded in. Thousands of people sharing similar stories. Teachers who'd believed in them. Teachers who'd destroyed them. The power of education to elevate or devastate. Dalton's communications office fielded interview requests. Morning shows wanted me to appear. Education journals requested articles. I declined most of them. This wasn't about becoming famous. It was about starting important conversations. But I did agree to write a follow-up piece for an education journal. I detailed the research more thoroughly, providing concrete strategies for teachers working with marginalized students. I emphasized systems-level change, not individual blame. 3 weeks after the lecture, an envelope arrived at my office. Old-fashioned handwriting I didn't recognize at first. Inside was a single page. "Dear Dr. Vega, I've spent the past weeks reflecting on my career, on the students I taught, and on you. What I did to you was wrong. I told myself I was being honest, preparing you for reality. But I was crushing potential I was too limited to recognize. You taught me more in that lecture than I taught you in a year. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I heard you, that I'm trying to change, that your success, despite me, has forced me to examine my failures. Truly, Ms. Alder. I read it 3 times, then placed it carefully inside my first published textbook, between the acknowledgments and the introduction. The semester continued. I taught my classes, advised students, continued my research, but something had shifted. The weight I'd carried for years, the need to prove myself, had lightened. One afternoon, a student came to office hours. She was quiet, nervous, clutching an essay. My high school teacher told me I wasn't smart enough for college, she admitted. Sometimes I think she was right. I invited her to sit. Then I told her my story, not the viral version, but the real one. The fear, the doubt, the moments I almost quit. By the end, she was crying. But you made it, she said. So can you, I replied. The teacher who doubted you doesn't define your potential, only you do. She left with her head a little higher. That evening, I recorded a voice memo to myself, a habit from those early days of writing in secret. Forgiveness is the final degree, I said quietly. Not forgetting, not excusing, but releasing the power those words once had over me. I'd spent years proving Ms. Alder wrong, but somewhere along the way, it stopped being about her. It became about every student who'd been dismissed, every kid told they weren't college material, every dreamer discouraged by authority. Ms. Alder was just one teacher, but the system that allowed her cruelty to go unchecked was much larger. Changing that system, one lecture and one student at a time, became my real work. The camera in my mind faded as I looked out my office window at the campus below. Students walking to class, dreamers and doubters, future professors and dropouts, all of them carrying someone's words for better or worse. My job now was to make sure those words built them up, not tear them down, because I knew, better than most, exactly how much words could matter, and exactly how far you could go despite them. The end became a beginning, and I was finally completely free.